The South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced the details of a new unity government to include representatives from outside the African National Congress. It follows weeks of deadlock that delayed the formation of a historic governing coalition. The ANC will continue to hold 20 posts, while the other 12 ministries will be shared among the coalition partners. In the north of the Democratic Alliance, its leader, John Steenhuisen, has been appointed the Minister of Agriculture, with the ANC maintaining its hold on the Ministry of Trade and Industry and a key portfolio that the DA had sought. The new unity government comes over months after elections stripped the ANC of its majority.
The people of South Africa voted in a watershed election. In casting their votes, our people made it clear that they expect political parties to work together to deliver on a mandate of transformation, growth, and renewal. And to give effect to this mandate, it was agreed that a government of national unity, which brings together parties from across the political spectrum, should be. The establishment of the government of national unity in its current form is unprecedented in the history of our democracy. We have had to consider how to form a new government in a manner that advances the national interest, that also gives due consideration to the outcome of the election, and that makes use of the respective capabilities within each of the parties represented. It is important that we deploy into positions of responsibility people who are committed, capable, and hardworking, and who also have integrity. We've had to ensure that all the parties are able to participate meaningfully in the national executive, as well as in various parliamentary positions, and that they should represent the diversity of the people of South Africa properly. Leaders of political parties, as ministers and deputy ministers, as public representatives, we understand and accept the responsibility that we bear. We have all been called upon to serve the people of this country, and we will do so to the utmost of our ability.
For more on the newly formed cabinet, we are now being joined by Thami Mseleku, the High Commissioner of the Republic of South Africa to the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Great to have you, Ambassador. Ambassador, this is the first of its kind in so many years. The ANC is not used to sharing, probably except for what Mandela tried to do in '94 when he had sort of like a rainbow cabinet and put everybody in, to have a bite of the cherry. But this time around, the ANC is struggling and having an old fight of legitimacy, not reaching the 50% mark for the very first time. And now it has to deal with the DA in ministerial positions. Do you see fault lines or brickbats, or you see hope and possibility, Ambassador?
Well, thank you very much for having us this morning. Definitely the approach that has been taken by our government to form a government of national unity is actually to bring hope to the people of South Africa. And therefore, I see a possibility of unexplored waters that will actually bring a little bit of stability in the country and possible economic growth and prosperity. Because if you went the different way, you would have found that you're actually polarizing the South African public or the South African constituency. So yes, I see serious hope in the future. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, if we're looking at this coalition, by very definition, you're going to have a collaboration with different political parties, but there have been some form of resistance to the involvement of the Democratic Alliance and perhaps their demands, if you can call it that, for the nationalization of white lands across South Africa. How do you think President Ramaphosa is going to have to tackle this? On the one hand, wanting to include the DA and its representatives, but also making sure that it doesn't revert or backslide into racist or racial territory?
Well, let's look at this cabinet very carefully. On the one hand, you have the Democratic Alliance that, as you say, may not be very pleased with any attempts to have land reform. On the other hand, you have the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania, a former liberation movement whose focus mainly is on land restitution, restoring the land to what it calls its original owners. If you look at the two ministries that actually deal mainly with land, the Agriculture Ministry is actually headed by the DA leader, Mr. John Steenhuisen, and the Land Ministry is actually headed by the PAC president. So you can see that there's always going to be a balancing act and engagement. What's important and has been agreed upon is that this kind of situation will have to lead to a consensus development so that people can have an approach that is agreed upon. No single party can come and say, I'm pushing my policy and you are pushing yours. This is a government of national unity.
All right, Ambassador, thank you so much for that. And Sani Bonani, to you. Let's get into some of the nitty-gritty of the details, because when we think of Nigerians and other foreign African nationals, one of the biggest issues that has become a sticking issue is xenophobia. Now, of course, at the foundation of the issue of xenophobia is illegal immigration, and of course, legal immigration and the blurred lines that are happening there, and what is termed to be, you know, the bad behavior of some illegal African nationals in South Africa. Now, with the Ministry of Home Affairs going to the Democratic Alliance, what are your projections about foreign policy concerning Africans coming to South Africa, especially pertaining to Nigerians who want to visit South Africa legally, but are now struggling to get visas because of the bad behavior of a few illegals within South Africa? Under the DA, do you see these relations warming up?
Well, first of all, can I just actually clarify one issue? Nigerians are not struggling to visit South Africa as a result of some of the illegal activities of a few Africans, perhaps including Nigerians. Not at all. There are many Nigerians that still go to South Africa. We deal with visa issuance in our offices almost every other day, with applications reaching 200, 400 almost every week. So there's never been a big challenge for problems with visa because of what is termed xenophobia. The challenge has had to do with administrative issues. And so from a policy point of view, the fact that the ministry is headed by a DA person does not change the policy of the government, which actually prioritizes the African continent. Our foreign policy puts the African continent first before any other area of the world in terms of our relations. But also our foreign policy and our is linked to our own trajectory in terms of tourism, and we put Africans and South Africans first in relation to our development of our tourism trajectory. So that is not going to change, and all you might have to see is like it was happening before. Our Minister of Home Affairs, just the one who was left, was actually trying to improve the situation in terms of making the administration of visa and passports and every other thing quicker and more efficient. So it may actually be a continuance of just making sure that the administrative capacities are actually improved, not policy as such. You won't have a kind of attitude that is different as you have, because as I say, on the one hand, you may have a DA minister, but these are cabinet decisions, a collective decision led by our president, who's very emphatic on these matters.
Okay. So, Minister, a couple of things. We're talking about this new South African cabinet. A lot of people have raised concerns, number one, about the DA. And the angle they keep putting is it's a white party. Although the DA has tried to say they are not white party. What are those concerns? How can we bridge it? Also, second concerns, and this is a general pervasive sentiment in Nigeria, that South Africa is not showing the cordiality Nigeria showed to them enough. And I'll give you instances. The story recently went viral as regards, the handshake with President Cyril Ramaphosa, that why was Nigeria put on the second row? And the word back in Nigeria is South Africa needs to treat Nigeria more highly because we stuck our neck out for South Africa during apartheid. We did a lot. Yes, on the second day there was a meeting between both presidents, but to a large extent, some people are saying locally here, these are the sentiments, that we feel that for an inauguration like South Africa, Nigeria should be front and center. Nigeria should also be forward because of the role and the fight we also played and the fight we also fought with the South Africans, in the apartheid struggle. The likes of Thabo Mbeki lived here, not far off from us here in Lagos, around 1004 Estate and all of that. And that's the relationship we have. It goes a long way. So why are we having all of this squabble and back and forth?
Well, it's interesting that those commentators, as you are actually quoting, are quoting the reality partially. First of all, let's deal with this matter of Nigeria sitting on the second row. We had Tanzania there, we had Angola there, we had Cuba there, we had a lot of countries that played critical roles in the struggle against apartheid, similar to Nigeria, if not more. Some of them, the Cubans, in fact, were on the forefront in Quito Cuanaville, which actually led to the liberation of Namibia. Tanzania, we trained our soldiers there. Our MK Angola had camps everywhere. Yet those presidents were also sitting on the second row because of the protocols that are involved in terms of our African protocols as such. You had kings and you had kings and queens that were actually represented there who happened to be on the first row. So it's not about who was on the first row or who was on the second row, because if we get into that kind of politics, then we will actually come with the counter things as to where our president was here when he was here for the inauguration. Those things don't help anybody in terms of the relationship. The issue of the handshake is also absolute fabrication, because anybody who was watching that situation saw that the president of South Africa was told to leave the stage, and then he started shaking hands with his counterparts that had visited. When he was then instructed to go back to his seat because the master of ceremonies at the time had made a mistake because he hadn't taken the salute and the national anthem. So he went back to his seat, and after which he actually went to shake hands with the people that were at the back. In fact, when he was shaking hands with the President Tinubu, the president of Tanzania, President Samia, was actually there, and the three of them had a very nice chat. So I think that kind of politics is a deliberate distortion of the truth from people who actually don't understand these relations between the two countries. That's why the two presidents are not bothered by it.
Okay, so a lot of people keep saying, and this is the sentiment or talk, despite the fact that the leader of the DA has tried to exonerate himself from this. I saw his interview on South African local channel saying, no, we're not a white party. People keep saying the DA is a white party. So the question here is, the ANC, the party of Priestley Isaka Semme, the fight for the rights of black people that were disenfranchised, that they were hurt under the Pakistan regime, now in bed with a DA, a white party, based on perception? I mean, how are you guys going to navigate this?
Well, let's go back to history. First and foremost, let's go back to history a little bit. First and foremost, we set around the table with people who had actually killed us, who had maimed us, who had detained us, who had put our leaders in jail for 27 years. And when our President Mandela came in there, the ANC had always said that it was for negotiations. You don't negotiate with your friends, you negotiate with your enemies. And therefore, the negotiations led to what was called the Government of National Unity, the first one that we had there, where we, both in administration and in the political sphere, had to work with people who had actually, some of them had tortured our people, some had killed them. That was the decision we took in order to ensure that we have a peaceful country that is stable. We have reached a stage again in our history where this racial polarization is actually beginning to emerge. If you look at the trends of the voting, our white compatriots have voted in their numbers, 73% of them, for what may be termed white parties. Whereas if you look at on the other side, the majority of the black South Africans have not voted for those white parties. They've voted for what may be termed black parties. Now, we can't have a situation where we are supposed to develop a non-racial society, but we still actually have the racial lines and we draw lines on racial grounds. This is why our president and the ANC has chosen to say we need to unite our nation, regardless of what we think of each other. We need to actually send a message that we are still one nation. Whether we are white, black, yellow, or what, we live in a South Africa and it's our home, all of us, and therefore we must find ways to actually live with each other. We may differ in how we see the future, how we see the policy, but at the end of the day, we mustn't actually fall into this white-black kind of politics, because it can lead to serious disasters for the future of our country.
Alrighty. In addition to that, if we take a look at South Africa's position when you're looking at geopolitics, international relations, it's been clear before this election what South Africa's stance is in this conflict that we're seeing in the Middle East, in Palestine, this Hamas-Israel war. With this coalition, can we expect a changing of voice when it comes to South Africa's position? Perhaps you can make clear, is South Africa still in support of Palestine as it continues to fall victim under the bombardment and the civilian death toll that we're seeing rising in Palestine and the Middle East as a whole?
The Minister of International Relations that has just left that position was accompanied by the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Minister Lamula, who was actually leading the legal aspects of this whole fight, putting together the legal team that actually represented South Africa in that ICU. Now, that same Minister Lamula has been appointed Minister of Foreign Affairs. That should tell you that he is actually appointed in order to ensure that there's continuity on some of the fronts that we are engaged with at the moment, particularly the one that you have referred to. But not only that, it's very clear that our foreign policy in general is actually never going to change, because we come from a background of internationalism, a background where we, as you have actually alluded to earlier on, actually got support from the international community for our own struggle. There's no way all of a sudden as South Africa we can leave people who are actually in the same struggles, in the same situation, fighting for self-determination, like the people of Sahrawi and the people of Palestine, and also the situation that we have of the blockade against Cuba. We are not going to abandon those kinds of policy. Remember, the ANC is still in majority. It could have formed a minority government and continued with its policy. But it chose to actually include everybody because the ANC is a uniter. It is meant to unite our people, not to divide them.
All right, thank you for that. Very well said. And of course, just to buttress your point with regards to the inauguration, we did see King Mswati and King Letsi of Lesotho sitting in the front row. So it was clear that the front row was for African royals. But now let's take a look at some of the other ministries. Department of Public Enterprises being moved into the presidency is a big point of conversation, because we know that when we are talking about state capture, when we are talking about some of the scandals and graft cases, many of them have emanated from public enterprise. Now, moving it into the president's office, what are we hoping to see in terms of overseeing Eskom and its unbundling, South African Airways, Transnet, Postnet, huge enterprises now within the public enterprise? Now under the president's office, of course, is leaving a lot of questions to be answered. And also, sorry, because our time will run out shortly, I'll also add my next question. My next question is around the Department of Education and the Department of Agriculture, specifically Department of Education, where I know the South African Teachers Union has already hinted at preparing to strike because they feel that the DA appointee or the DA manifesto will not take care of black students and black teachers. So I understand the point that you're saying that government policy is government policy. It's not affected by parties. But I believe that minister from the DA reeled out some of her new policies and her vision and her strategies on social media just yesterday. So this continuation of mixed messaging coming from the ANC and the DA, the ANC says one thing, then Helen Zille comes and says another. So many issues to unbundle. I'm so sorry to drop that on your desk, but can you take us through each of these one by one?
Well, let me start with the last one. Look, there is no denial that once you actually put on the table people from various backgrounds into governance, they will come with their own ideas of what governance involves and so on. We only have to see this in action when they have to engage with the reality of how policy is made in government. It's not as easy as putting something that is that will be on social media, because it involves consensus building. And if people are convinced with what you are saying as your policy, then we will see what the outcome is. Of course, again, our society as a whole will also engage with some of these issues. Some will accept this appointment and some will say this particular appointment is wrong. One of the things that the government has decided, the president, is to actually call a national dialogue of every stakeholder in order to discuss what are the priorities of South Africa, what policy directions can we make, and the input will come from civil society, from religious groups, from everybody. And once that national consensus has been built, no one can actually then come with their own individual policy directions. So let me emphasize, this government of national unity is not about the DA policy, the ANC policy, or the PAC or the IFP, which also have their policies, the PA, all the 9 parties that are there. It's about building consensus about what policy direction this country needs to take. And that is going to come out in the policy processes, including the national dialogue. So even within the education sector, I don't think there's going to be any major policy shift. It's a matter of emphasis, and as Satu says, maybe they will emphasize less on teachers. Let us see. Let's wait and see. Give her, by the way, a very articulate and a very good candidate of the Democratic Alliance. Let's give her a chance to lead, and let's see whether we can persuade her also away from some of the positions that they are taking. That's part of a give and take that we're going to have in the government of national unity. So that's the one part. Quickly, the public enterprise story. The public enterprise department or ministry was actually merely a policy ministry. So what the president has actually said is that the policy aspects, including the ones you are relating to, which is the unbundling of ESCOM and so on, will relate to the ministries that are concerned. So for ESCOM, it will relate to the Ministry of Energy and Electricity. And for the other entities, they will go to the relevant ministries that are actually related to them. South African Airways, Ministry of Transport. What goes to the presidency is the issue of the shareholder discussion. In other words, at the moment, there's a policy that is saying government in some of them is actually the only shareholder. And so it must be government that decides how it's going to actually dilute its shareholding and to what extent that diluting may mean complete giving away authority of government or decision-making of government, or sharing but still leading. And that must be a policy that is led by the president. So that is why that particular aspect is in the presidency.
Okay, so can you talk to me any thinking behind giving a public service ministry to somebody from the IFP with a very famous Buthelezi name? And secondly, can you also talk to me about what will be the lot of the tourism ministry, that has been given, to the political party with the acronym GOOD, because that's a very key sector. I see a lot of reforms, in fact, even to your Travel South Africa, reforms on tourism and all of that. Can you also walk me through the thinking behind all of those two sectors?
Well, let me start by saying broadly, as the president said, this was more about accommodating almost everybody and giving them a meaningful role. Let me start by saying, in fact, in the first government of President Mandela, Buthelezi, our may his soul rest in peace, was actually part of that government, and he was in charge of Home Affairs, for that matter, in the Mandela government. He also was part of the Mbeki government. In fact, the participation of other parties has always been there with the ANC in the helm. The IFP was part of the Mbeki government with, again, Buthelezi being Minister of Home Affairs, and one of the ministries, which is Science and Technology, was also headed by the IFP. It's not the first time that the IFP is part of the national government. And therefore, there's no surprise that the leader of the IFP is actually now given that responsibility. It's been part of the process almost for years. Tourism, actually, the Minister of Tourism is a continuation. She was already a Minister of Tourism from the Good Party. And she was, before then, a minister, in any case, in the President Ramaphosa's government, when he actually had a change of government and moved certain ministers, he moved the minister from Public Works to tourism. So she was and is continuing to be the Minister of Tourism already. In fact, when we had the tourism in Daba, she was the one who was addressing this and raised the issue of saying she would want to engage her counterpart here so that Nigeria can also participate fully at that level in the tourism in Daba. So there's no change there, there's nothing new.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Also, across board, Thami, you've got questions?
No, go ahead. Go ahead if you want.
So also across board, Vimbai did talk about some very key sectors, and I want you to react to them. Prior to the elections, South Africa's had power, but a lot of people still feel it's a gimmick by ESCOM. Prior to this time, ESCOM, in the early 2000s, what used to be one of the best run companies in the world, today, is one of the worst run companies in the world. Sustainable plans around ESCOM that powers the economy greatly. That's number one by this administration. Secondly, corruption scandals. The president has his own fair share of these scandals that people keep talking about. And these things are not going to go away. Thirdly, is going to be the issue of Julius Malema and the MK leader, the former President Jacob Zuma. What become the lot of these two men is still the political architecture of the country. because they are disgruntled in their own path. They didn't see this alliance with the DA coming.
Well, let me start with the last one. The MK party, on the engagement with the ANC being invited as part of the discussions of getting everybody involved in this government of national unity, made it clear that it wouldn't want to work with the government. It would rather be the leader of the opposition party, because it will be the biggest opposition if the DA is in government. So they have chosen to actually be in opposition in parliament. And they've clearly said that they're not there to disrupt anybody. They are there to engage very seriously and to oppose things and to push the agenda that they would want to see, so that government can be held accountable. That's their stance, and we've seen their leader in parliament, the former Judge Hlophe, actually putting it very clearly that they are there to promote some of the policies that they believe are going to actually benefit the poor, etc. But they will do it in a parliamentary and constitutional way. So that's the one part. It's their right to actually be the opposition. Similarly, the EFF did the same thing. They actually wrote to the ANC and clearly said, we will not come in if you have the DA there. That was their position, their choice, and they've said they're going to be in parliament very much there, ensuring that they hold every ministry, the whole government accountable. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic, because on the one hand, you had former people who were in opposition actually holding the previous government accountable, now being held by others accountable because they are now also in government. We will see how that will emerge, but that's part of democracy. It's an exercise where they will represent their constituency, just like the president said the other parties that are coming to the government of national unity are reflecting the diverse constituencies of South Africa. That's what's going to happen.
All right. So the first question, what becomes a lot of, the energy company of South Africa, and that used to be one of the best run companies in the world in the early 2000s, but today it's about the worst run company in the world. What's going to be the long-term sustainability plan and the issues of corruption scandal against the president?
Well, let's start with Eskom. And you know that our president actually, in the previous government, appointed a special ministry to deal with electricity in South Africa and the running of Eskom. And as a result, you can see the turnaround already. In fact, we haven't had load shedding for almost months, and people thought it was because of the election. We continue not to have load shedding in South Africa because the focus on trying to turn around Eskom and to build it into its former glory is an ongoing thing, which is why the Ministry of Energy and Electricity has actually been separated from the Ministry of Minerals and Petroleum Services. So the focus on rebuilding the capacity of Eskom through our national plan for our national energy plan is ongoing, and it will go on. And the unbundling of Eskom is also still on the agenda, which is why this issue of the shareholding is in the presidency. So that's an ongoing matter. Now, on the issues of whatever alleged corruption, both in the past, on the one hand, there are issues of corruption that came from the Zondo Commission. They are still being investigated, and there will still be prosecutions that will continue. When it comes to the matters that relate to the president, the parties that want to bring those matters back will do so. It's their democratic right to do so, and Parliament will consider them. The agencies, the legal agencies of the country, if they go to the courts, will consider them. Let's wait and see what happens in those And if anything comes out of them, then there will be action around those particular matters. At the moment, the matters are actually, from a parliamentary point of view, now being resuscitated by the letter of the EFF, particularly the Pala issue. Let's wait and see how Parliament deals with it. We will see. And if Parliament feels that it is necessary to pursue that matter, it will do so. No one will prevent it from doing that because it acts independently.
That's right. Well, so I believe the spirit for now is let's wait and see. Of course, we do wish South Africa well. When South Africa thrives, the rest of Africa also thrives. South African High Commissioner to Nigeria, Thami Mseleku, thank you so much for your time today.